Hey y'all, I'm Barton Seaver, chef and author, and I'm so pleased that you are joining me here today, wherever you are joining us from. Thanks for being part of the Ruby family. I'm joining you from the ragged, jagged, delicious coast of Maine, where my wife, two sons, and I live right on the coast, and life is delicious. And, well, as you know, anybody who's joined us before knows that I like to start off with something that I'm grateful for, because cooking for people is an act of love. It is an act of kindness, and it is the greatest ingredient that we can put into our food is care for others. So I think it pays to be mindful of that, and just to, well, start these off by saying something that I am grateful for. And you know what? I'm grateful for October. Life is always great. It's better in October, which is when I'm filming this at the moment right now. But hey, just an incredible autumn we've been having here. I hope that you've been having the same. And my Red Sox are playing. Oh my gosh. Baseball is just at its peak right now. Life is great. That's what I'm grateful for. So I'm actually coming to you from the past right now because I filmed a video of a couple of dishes that I wanted to start off with. These are fun, very chefy dishes. These are very labor-intensive, involved things that, well, they're just fun. And they take a little while, and I couldn't show it to you all in one take on this event here today. So I made them ahead of time, and I'll share this with you, and then I'm going to join you live in just a few minutes here once I'm done explaining these, and we'll talk through a little bit of these. Yeah, and we can talk whatever you want. So, what are these crazy dishes you've got, Barton? Well, I have got two chickens here, and I, excuse me, I boned these out so that they would be, I took the skin entirely off in its whole form, and then rolled the chicken back into the skin in various forms in two different recipes. The first here, this is a chicken roulade. This is the breast rolled inside, and then a chicken force meat flavored with tarragon and fennel seed is put into there. So a classic sort of French style roulade, and then tied and roasted. And this is chicken in the style of porchetta. Porchetta is an absolutely delicious Roman dish of whole pork shoulder that's been marinated with all sorts of spices, fresh sage and rosemary. What else? Black pepper, fennel seed, tons of garlic. There's some red wine vinegar in here. And these recipes and a step-by-step how-to video of this are all posted, I believe, just right under me right now. The event document, excuse me, as well as a link to the video of showing you how to bone out the chicken as I did, to take the skin off and then put them all back together. So you can see I just tied them up and roasted them. It took about 50 minutes or so. I cut off those little ties, and are you ready for this? I'm ready for this because I don't know how it turned out because I haven't done this in years and years and years. So, nice sharp knife. I'm just gonna go right straight in the middle. Da-da-da. Oh my God. Yeah, look at that. So the white meat perfectly cooked, so it's still moist. All of that meat was butterflied out into thin pieces, the leg meat around the outside. You've got the garlic paste and everything in there. This chicken skin on the outside, crisped on top, roasted beautifully. Wow. Okay, so this turned out well. And to serve something like this, just make sure you're holding it together for that structural integrity. But man, those little beautiful slices like that. I can't wait to eat this. My wife just got home for lunch, and that's what we're going to eat. All right. Next one, we can answer questions about that if you'd like to. And then the next one is that roulade. This is with that chicken force meat. Force meat is an emulsion, so I took the chicken legs and I ground those up with fennel seed and tarragon, as I said, and egg white. And then I very slowly emulsified in heavy cream. And this is how you make a force meat, a pate, if you will. And then I took the breast meat, butterflied that out until it was nice and thin, put a layer of that just beneath the skin, and then rolled that mousseline or that force meat into it, and then rolled it all back up. And you see I put a cross tie on this one as well, just to keep it all in shape. Some of that mousseline came out on the side there. I'm gonna eat that. That's delicious. All right, here we go. Yeah. 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 I win. And so do you. Because hopefully maybe you'll make this too. You'll take up the challenge of trying to do something fun, learn some new skills, and bring something fun to this, either the holiday table or to, well, whatever meal you choose to serve us for. So, all right, I'm coming back to you live now. Okay. Hey, everybody. How are you? It's nice to see you. Thanks for joining me, and thanks for that fun little intro. I had a lot of fun cooking those, and that was a while ago. And yeah, hey, I'm Barton Seaver, chef author, joining you from the delicious, ragged, jagged, delicious coast of Maine, where my sons Alden and Rosie, my lovely ladyfish wife, Carrie Ann, and I live on a farm that no longer has chickens. They have been given to a young farmer in the area for his new egg layer program in a world where the leaves are still potent, yet past their prime, blown off in all sorts of autumn storms that we have had thus far. But listen, life in autumn is a gift. And Thanksgiving is just, wow. I mean, what a wonderful way to celebrate it all, right? So one of the things that's not a gift, I mentioned this in my original video, was that the Red Sox lost. So be it. At least the Astros didn't win. I'm just going to go on record and say, like, I'm not an Astros fan, not at all, and go Braves. So I'm happy for that. But baseball is a gift. It's a wonderful sport. And so are you. I really appreciate all of you joining me. Some of you who would join us pretty regularly might notice that we have a slightly different setup today. The video might be a little crisper, a little clearer, a little more beautiful in those colors. The sound might be a little bit better. Do you like that? I'm saying that just for you. Anyway, all of this is due to the incredibly hard work and diligence of my business partner, Katie, and my colleague and partner at Ruby, Patrick, without whom none of this would happen, let alone none of it would get better than it is. And so to them, I am grateful for you. Thank you so very much. Anyway, so into Thanksgiving, right? I mean, hey, this is a season of fun and cooking, and there's so much joy and wonder and just creativity and tradition and heritage all wrapped up into this. So much to celebrate, so much to be mindful of for Indigenous populations and the resulting, well, history that we've left for them, but also just to celebrate our place in this world, our place together at the table, communing together around food. And as any of you who joined me before know, that I think food is love. Feeding people is an act of kindness, as I said in my earlier video, I believe. So thanks for all you do. So let's dive in. I've got a number of questions here for you from you here already. So those of you who are just joining us for our first event, over there on the right-hand side up in the questions box, if you've got a question that you would like me to answer, please drop it in there and I will try and get to it. If there is a question that has already been asked over in that right-hand column that you are particularly interested, click that heart icon and it will be voted up to the top. So I'll be sure to get to it. Any questions that we don't get to today, I'm sorry about that, but I will try and get to them, back to them. And this is part of a month-long series about Thanksgiving and all sorts of things. So I'm doing birds, and then 2 weeks from now, I believe I'm doing sides. Dan Merrick, one of our incredibly talented chefs and content directors, is going to be doing a couple as well. I mean, everybody is throwing in on this. Delicious Fran and all of the joy that she brings to us. Anyway, so that whole series link is over there for you. The whole video of the roulades that I had just made in that intro video, the whole video is over there on the right-hand side for a YouTube video for you to check that out. And all of the recipes that, well, not all the recipes I'll be doing, but an entire Ruby recipe packet for your Thanksgiving pleasure will be on display for you. That's another link for you there. As always, please do follow me on Instagram. I always love the followers and check in on my life outside of these regular events. Thanks for joining me here. Let's dive in. We're going to take a first question, maybe a couple questions, and then I'm going to tell you about a couple of things that I've got going on. I'm going to demo a spatchcocking technique, which is, I have no idea where that word comes from. But it's helpful, and we'll talk about turkey. We'll talk about all things, all sizes of birds. So with that, let's go to my dear friend Judith. Judith, nice to see you. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for joining as always. And you ask, do I have a terrific oyster dressing recipe? Well, as you say, you're sure that I do have one, and indeed you are right. I do have one. Visit the link that's going to be published. Maybe Patrick can put it up here. So last Thanksgiving, my dear friend Steve Curwood, who is the host of the NPR show Living on Earth, we did a lengthy interview about the importance of oysters to the ecosystem, to our history, and to our cuisine. And as part of that, I did a little video and demo of an oyster stuffing recipe with brioche. I think there was maybe even some dried apricots and pine nuts in there, like just silly delicious. Silly delicious. Anyway, that is the recipe, as well as a whole video demo of that is in that link there. Patrick, you did put it up there, it looks like, down there at the bottom. So, Judith, please check that out. That is Living on Earth, the syndicated NPR program where I did an oyster stuffing recipe. Awesome, friend. Hey, nice to see you. Thanks for joining as always. All right, I'm going to scroll down through a couple of questions from Naya. I think I pronounced that right, Naja. Naya. Foolproof turkey/bird recipe, please. Really? Really? Already? You're just going to throw me the difficult question? 11 minutes into this thing, huh? I appreciate that. Nice challenge. All right, so a foolproof recipe that I do not have for you. There is no such thing as a foolproof recipe with birds. There are so many determinants to it. So I'm going to give you a very lengthy answer to this, Naya. And part of that is because, well, you have asked the central question that is the organizing principle around what we're doing today. So let's say foolproof. Let's go back to the beginning. And this is something that I encourage all culinarians to do, which is think about what is the intended result. What are you trying to achieve, right? Before I give you a foolproof recipe, or I can't really, think about what you want. Do you want a bird where both the meat and the breast, the leg meat and the breast meat are succulent and flavorful, and a skin is crispy and beautiful golden brown, and the whole thing is intact and it's gorgeous, and you are just domestic goddess, whatever you want to be? You know what? I'm sorry, I just can't do that for you. So to me, and so sort of what I wanted to explain today is I like to sort of pick and choose what my goals are. And to me, the majority of the time, the goal is delicious meat, right? Because that's what you're actually eating. Yes, there's the whole pomp and circumstance of a presentation. Look at me, look at this thing I have done for thee, I love. Yeah, but the browner the turkey, typically the drier it is. I've never actually succeeded at crisping the skin of a turkey to the point where what's underneath it, the meat, is really tasty. And you know what? Turkeys are so big, there's going to be so much of that meat that, well, I want to be sure that it's going to be good. Why? Because I'm going to be eating it forever, right? So to me, it's low and slow in an oven. That dark meat doesn't break down as much. It still retains a little bit more of its texture and its chew, which I tend to like, but low and slow. 275 degrees for several hours. I've even done turkeys overnight before, big ones. And part of that is also because I don't have much oven space. I've got this tiny little thing, and it's got a vaulted oven, so I don't have a whole lot of space in there. So a big 20-pound turkey, if I'm going to cook it right, it's going to take many hours. So yeah, I cook it overnight, and I don't think that turkeys really need to be served hot. And in fact, if you cook it properly to 165 degrees internal temperature, which is max, for my family, what I am comfortable with, and this is not an official recommendation, I am comfortable with serving turkeys at about 100, taking them out of the oven at about 150 degrees. And they're so big, they're so dense that it does carry over till it nears 165. The turkeys that I have, well, they are literally grown on a field about a quarter mile down the road from my house. On a good day without a shoulder injury, I could probably throw a baseball there. Like, I mean, this is close. I know how they're raised, and I'm very fortunate for that. So foolproof recipe, though, is about, I would say, 15 to 17 minutes per pound at about 325 degrees. I like to do it low and slow first and foremost, and then pull it out of the oven, get your broiler rip roaring hot, slather the whole thing with butter, put it back in there and get it broiled. That's probably the most foolproof recipe I've got, but one of the things that I want to show you now is a spatchcock method that I like better because it gives you a little bit more control. So I hope that helps, Naya, and well, I hope you stick around because you're going to learn a lot more about it. So one other question here, and then we're going to dive into that technique here. We're empty nesters. Any tips for making a chicken festive enough for the big feast for Marunia? Well, yeah. Hey, try one of those roulades that I did in those openings. I mean, it's fun. It's a culinary challenge. You know what? If you mess up the skin, so be it. It's fine. Like, it's fine. It still presents beautifully. It still eats beautifully. So the culinary challenge is there more just in that sort of nuance of the butchery, but you got this. You got it. Take your time with it. You know what? You might eat chicken regularly. Give it a try. Give it a practice run. And you know, you don't even have to make the roulade first. You can just give it a practice run to try and bone that out and try and get the skin off in that fun way. And then just use the chicken and make a stock or a soup with it, whatever. But you've got the practice there. So that's a fun way to do it. The other thing is just, I mean, to me, Thanksgiving, it's the sort of the festive bird. The bird is really just the centerpiece, right? But the centerpiece is really the garnish to the table, if you ask me. It's all about the sides. So join me again in a couple of weeks and to Dan's events as well for the sides, because that's really what makes the meal. And really, a properly, perfectly roasted chicken with moist, succulent breast meat is slightly textured skin. I won't say crispy, but textured skin with perfectly done meat, both the dark meat and the breast meat, cut into big, beautiful chunks, served with a nice bread salad or with a stuffing like that. Man, I mean, that's festive enough when food is perfect. So I'll leave you with that. All right, and then I see from Darlene, we've got a question about spatchcocking. So I like to spatchcock and dry brine my bird. When placing it in the fridge, I'm always concerned about contaminating other foods in the fridge. What's the best way to go about this? Okay, so before we even get into the spatchcock technique, let's just talk about food safety there. So I'm lucky that in Maine, the big fridge, I call it, which is the outside world, that big fridge turns on about this week. So I've got a mudroom out there, that's our entryway, that I use as our principal refrigerator for most of the winter. Why? Well, it saves on electricity and it's green and sustainable, etc. But it also does a better job, quite honestly. It's because it's cold out there. So I've got my whole Thanksgiving meal like spread out throughout the entire mudroom. The only food safety hazard there is that I've got a 16-month-old little boy that just loves to just like touch everything, right? Anyway, I keep it out of his risk. But here's the thing. Food safety-wise, salmonella comes through transfer, through touch, and through liquid, right? Gravity. Gravity is your friend here. Gravity is your friend. If your turkey or your chicken is underneath everything else, there's no way that it's just going to give off particles and reach everything else up top. So there you go. Gravity is your best friend there, but also just a closed container. And your dry brine, if you're spatchcocking it, cut it into 2 pieces. Put it in a large Ziploc plastic bag or something. If you can get a bag big enough, some of those sports bags that they make are helpful for this. If you're really that worried about it, just throw it in the bag and let it dry brine in there. Cool? Awesome. All right, so let's get into the spatchcock technique, and then I'm going to pull out something that I've had in the oven for a little while, which is another technique, and a bird of all size. And going back up to, I'm sorry, I forget who the question came from, maybe Arlene, about a festive bird or chicken. So check this out. Whoa! Whoops. Uh-oh. Ha, ha, ha. Oh, man. Look at this. Crazy. Yeah. Look at that. Not quite done yet, but that is a salt-roasted Cornish game hen. That's fun. So, all right. I think that needs another 5-7 minutes, so we'll deal with that in just a second. Okay, so for spatchcocking, the first thing I'm going to do is just because I have all this parsley on my cutting board that I'm going to use for the chicken. I've got parsley. I've got several tablespoons of butter in here because I'm Barton Seaver. Hi, nice to meet you. Thanks for joining me. Anyone who has joined before knows that I love me some fennel seed. Lots of fennel seed thrown in there. A little bit of salt. And what I'm doing here is I'm making the outside marinade for the bird. I've got a microplane. I've got a couple of cloves of garlic. I could have done this ahead of time, but you know what? Can I tell you a secret? I am a mess. I'm a mess. I am a father, a husband with 2 small children, a full-time job, a life, a farm, all these things. So, you know what? Sometimes I'm just disorganized. Most often, I'm very disorganized, and that is deeply okay. I hope that you are disorganized in ways, and that it is deeply okay for you too, because that is life, and it is in fact a life well lived, if you ask me. So that's why I'm doing this now for you here today, instead of having done it before. So here is garlic. Throw that away. So I've got garlic, fennel seed, parsley, a little bit of salt, and some butter. So the spatchcock technique involves taking the whole bird, and the reason why I like this is that the spatchcock technique is basically taking the backbone out of the bird. What does the backbone do? It creates structure for the bird. That structure is beautiful, right? And this is a beautiful little 3.5, 4-pound chicken here. This is gorgeous. It sits upright, right? I mean, it's this beautiful construction. But that cavity inside is very hard to deal with because that cavity doesn't heat up as much. It holds cold air and in fact acts as this sort of inversion because the cold air kind of gets locked in there because there's not a lot of air flow through it. You can work with that with a convection oven by putting the open side of the turkey or the bird towards the fan. That can help cook more evenly and fully. But bottom line is, this is a hard thing to cook. Why? Because you have meat that is far more dense in the legs and thus cooks slower. You have the meat that is less dense in the breasts and also that is more exposed, right? This meat all the way down here, right down there at the hip bone cavity, it doesn't get a lot of heat exposure, right? What is moving around? Oh, it's the family of mice that have moved into my farmhouse. Sorry, because I live in a farmhouse in Maine, and that's what happens. Anyway, so that's going to cook a lot slower than what's on the outside. So spatchcocking is basically the practice of giving yourself a little bit more or taking out some of the variables. Now, this is something you have to do very carefully, and it is butchery. So what you are trying to do is take out the backbone, generally along those lines right there, right down the middle. And what you need to do is separate out the hip bone here and the wing bone here. And how do you do that? Sharp knife. And make cuts. Keep your hand way out of the way. See how I'm gripping it over here? This bird is dry, so it's not going to go all over the place. You don't want to use a whole lot of pressure to it. You want to use the knife. So that's how I'm doing it. I'm going down. I'm not pushing. I'm not trying to kill the bird. It's already on your cutting board. It's already where you need it to be. So you can either flip it over and do it in the opposite direction at this point. But again, what you are doing is just maintaining control and cutting off right on either side of that backbone. And that's what you get. So that meat there, or that bone, then becomes part of your stock. And what you have now is a bird without a backbone. So you have a lot more access to the inside. And what I like to do is snap it off the breast just a little bit, kind of break it off of that cartilage piece there. But look at that. You now have a generally even thickness bird. That's a lot easier to cook. So I leave all these little bits of fat and everything in there, and I'm going to take some salt and salt the inside of this bird. It's also very hard to salt the inside of the cavity effectively when it's still a cavity. I just put my salmonella chicken hands into that salt, so I'm going to throw that out and use it later. Sorry, but I'm giving you a bad example. So when you put it in a pan, what you want to do is you now have some good, like that's a nice presentation, right? And when it comes out of the oven like that, it's going to be a very nice presentation, legs crossed, and you also have space around it. So I'm going to wash my hands briefly. I'm going to get this pan that I have over here rolling. I've got that. Yep. Hey, I got my stove to work. That's awesome. It's always a benefit, right? So in retrospect, I'm going to add a little bit of pepper and some more fennel seeds to this. I have pepper and fennel seed in my pepper grinder because that's what I like. I don't think pepper does well when on its own. I'll wash that again later. So I'm getting that pan hot. I'm mixing together the butter, the fennel seed, everything else there. And then the other thing I really like about spatchcock technique is you get a nice cast iron pan going, something like this. This is just a big Le Creuset. I've even got a larger one that I might recommend as well. I'm going to put in a little bit of butter into the bottom of this. And I like butter for this. Why? Because basically you're making your gravy in the bottom of the pan with this, and this herb butter is going to melt all over the top, and it's going to get in there. All the vegetable juices are going to get all happy and hearty and healthy together. So I've got 1 bag of Brussels sprouts here, and 1 Brussels sprout that refuses to come out. There it is. I've got a mixture of some mushrooms here. These are shiitakes, oysters, king trumpet mushrooms. I'm going to throw those in stemless on the shiitakes. All mushrooms. Just kind of break them up. Okay, any pieces of that go into your stock, right? So you just want to toss that until they're lightly coated in butter. I'm going to add a little bit more fat here with olive oil because happy times. So I've got the oven set to about 400. I'm going to throw the chicken right in on top of this. Now this chicken was salted ahead of time. So what you got here now is, check that out, right? You got all those beautiful Brussels sprouts, the mushrooms around the outside, basically providing sort of a raft underneath the bird upon which it sits. You've got this pan that is super hot. And the importance of that is that you want that pan to really transfer heat up through the vegetables. You don't want to just let it rely on roasting. Why? Because you have a density of ingredients now on the bottom. That thick, heavy bottom pan is key to this. I am just going to smear some of this butter over the top. And then I'm going to take out the thing that is in the oven, which is that salt-baked bird. And then just take the whole thing and throw it right, whole pan and everything. I'm going to turn my broiler on. I've got a dual function oven, so I've got a broiler and an electric broiler and a gas heat underneath. So, all right. So there you go. Hey, everybody. All right. So spatchcock chicken is now in the oven. We've got half an hour or so on that, 35 minutes at about 400 degrees. I don't mind cooking the bird pretty hot on this because I know I've got a good management of the heat. So that is the spatchcock bird. And the reason why I like this is that the presentation is gorgeous. And you get all of these flavor sort of melding opportunities that you don't get really with the bird when the bird is the only thing going into the pan. Sure, you can throw in some some herbs, etc. Thyme, sage, rosemary, the poultry herbs. I'm a big fan of using tarragon with birds. Tarragon is absolutely delicious. I think it is the perfect pairing with culinary birds. Tarragon should be used fresh at the end. So say with your gravy, add it in just at the very end of that process. So, okay. I'm going to take a bunch more questions. I'm just going to grab a sip of water there. Excuse me. Okay. So, questions about spatchcocking. Darlene, you mentioned in yours about the safety aspects of saving, but you also mentioned dry brining. So brining, that's an important question, right? And we hear a lot about this. And one of the things that I love the most about this season, I'm just going to take a little tangent, is that every food magazine feels the need to reinvent Thanksgiving turkey every single year. So Food and Wine magazine this year reinvented the turkey with a salt-baked turkey, which is why I did it this way. It's a little Cornish game hen. I just wanted to try it out. I've never done that before. I think it's really funny that they do that, but really just a bird that has been salted heavily for about 4 to 24 hours ahead of time, or has been dropped into a brine, and you have a recipe for the brine, my brine that I like to use in your event document there, the link up at the top. So my brine is a salt sugar brine, and I can't remember exactly the brine I gave you. It might have some cranberry juice in it, etc. So you can add a whole lot of flavors you want through brine, but basically what a brine or a dry brine does, and the difference there is the inclusion of water. So it's salt and sugar either in solution in water or just salt and sugar if you care for, but just salt typically, added on top of the bird, and it absorbs into the cells of the flesh. And this is true in vegetables, this is true in beef, this is true in fish and chicken, etc. And what that does is salt strengthens the cellular walls within the flesh. And what that does is that when it cooks, the moisture that's inside those cellular walls that's protected by them exudes less. So you end up with more moisture retention. Brining or wet brining does not add moisture in this case, it retains moisture. There are some chemical brines that are often applied to commercially widely available birds that are in fact intended to pump them up with additional water. Now, if you think that those cells are already sort of perfectly matched to their task of protecting what's inside, add 5 to 6% more moisture, and you've swollen that cell. You're already stressing those cell walls. And when they cook, they're already under stress and they exude even more moisture. So those moisture added birds, I don't get them. I appreciate that some people on a budget need those birds are artificially cheap. I'm not a fan of the agricultural practices that go into them. And I'm talking about the mass market giant turkeys that we see everywhere. Those are simply not great products. I understand their place in the American experience. And so I'm not picking on that, but I don't like them. Buy a turkey from a great place. If you're going to put something in the center of your table, you know what? Just buy good ones. And one that's not brined, and then take it home, dry brine it again, 4 hours to 24 hours for a big bird, so the salt has time to penetrate all the way in. A wet brine can be done for, I think, 4 to 12 hours or so, even more. And this is also important if you're going to smoke a turkey. We can get into that a little bit later. But again, what this does is it adds so much flavor, it adds so much texture, and as well, it helps that moisture retention, giving you a little bit more leeway with the cooking time. So Darlene, thanks for that. So going down to Natalie and her question about spatchcocking. Spatchcocking the bird, best way to get even cooking without drying out the breast. I believe so, Natalie, and that's kind of why I do it, because what it does is it doesn't reduce the amount of time that you cook the breast for so much as it evens the heat that you're applying to both the breast and the leg meat. It's not hard to get the breast meat cooked. It's hard to get the breast meat cooked so it's still moist and delicious, and get the leg meat fully done so that it's safe and palatable, right? So the spatchcocking to me is really about getting more even heat access and application than anything else. And so, yes, I think that this is the best way to do it. So we got another question from Pem, if I'm reading it right, Pem, about spatchcocking, and then I'll answer one more little thing about that I like. Ditto the question about spatchcocking, and if so, how would you brine it and with what? Thanks in advance. Okay, so same thing with salting that, except you now have better access to what was formerly the cavity. So you can salt from all sides. So I would use the same amount of salt overall. I would just distribute it a little bit differently. If you were to wet brine, throw in whatever spices and herbs, vegetables, whatever that you want in there. If you really like a garlicky chicken, cool, man. Make a puree or a paste out of garlic and mix a bunch of salt and sugar and some water into it, some lemon juice, and throw it in there, man. Just cool. If you don't like garlic at all and you want the elegant, svelte taste of tarragon and thyme, infuse that in. Use a little bit of vinegar. You can use soy sauce. Literally use any flavor combination that you want to. I don't do kiwis and bananas, maybe, right? Just like with some red wine, like don't do that. Just don't. It's not going to taste good. But basically any flavor combination that you can think of that's going to be good, you can throw into that brine. Just be mindful that the brine does go into the trash. So don't spend a whole lot of money on your brine, meaning you don't shave truffles into it, for example, right? Okay. Or steep some foie gras in your water before you do it. Just like, don't do that. But literally anything else that you can think of. But to me, it's about 2 parts salt, 1 part sugar, and then as much or as little flavoring as you want per quart or so of liquid, just enough to cover. And you should do it if you're dry brining or keep it chilled, just for food safety reasons. If you are going to dry brine it and then immediately cook it, I do like when a chicken or a bird is brought out of deep cold. Like you don't want it to be 35 degrees all the way through, because then you're just fighting cold with heat. If it's brought up to room temperature just for an hour even ahead of time, it can even out the cooking. If you think about it, those bones, what are bones? They're very dense, and so they hold their cold very well. And that's why it's hard to get the meat right around the bones cooked to the proper temps. Okay, hey, thanks for this questions about spatchcocking. So let's move on with some other things from Sharon. Hi, friend. I'm a grad of several Ruby courses, an enthusiastic home cook looking for a good culinary general reference book. Are there any other besides the CIA's Classic Pro Chef? Thanks and happy holidays. Yes, absolutely. So one that just got published, Amanda Hesser from the New York Times, who just basically puts all cooks to shame. She is so good at what she does and so prolific that it's sort of like one of those questions like, did Shakespeare really write all of those plays? Like Amanda Hesser is like on that level. And her recipes are so legit. Anyway, she just came out with a book, I believe. I have not seen it, but I believe it's called The Recipes of Record. I just saw it today on an Instagram post from a friend. So she writes for the New York Times and does a lot of recipes there. Those recipes they're just good. And without having seen the book, I can just say that's it. That's a perfect one. The New York Times cookbooks generally are just amazing. And they sort of venture into the joy of cooking sort of level of breadth and depth, but also a little bit of creativity in there. So it's not just, here's your sauteed salmon with brown butter caper sauce, but there's some very interesting nuances and cultures and cuisines brought into this. So check out those big sort of compendium New York Times ones. America's Test Kitchen is a really, really great one. Again, they do sort of essential recipe cookbooks that they're just legit and they're great. The Joy of Cooking, of course, that's a great one. I really love looking back through old Joy of Cooking. If you look back to the original one, like there's recipes for possum and squirrel and all sorts of things that people cooked back then. It's very much more contemporary today, but they do a great job in keeping it updated to modern tastes, etc. 2 other books that risking something here. So there is the Silver Spoon cookbook. So this is by Fiden. This is an Italian sort of all things culinaria book. And they go generally by, well, they do a lot of regional books, but the Silver Spoon is the joy of cooking for Italy. And their food, the cooking in Italy simply is different than what you're going to see in CIA's Pro Chef. It's just a different sensibility. And so you can learn a huge amount by looking at this as well as CIA in terms of sort of comparing those different stylizations of food and cuisine. And then, of course, you could buy my books, available wherever fine books are sold, and at online retailers as well. The Joy of Seafood is sort of my contribution to that, attempted contribution to that level of cuisine, of just sort of saying, here's a compendium of everything you need to know about fish and seafood and how to cook it, and nearly 1,000 recipes. But there you go. That's a good list of books for you there. There are plenty others that I would recommend that I'm blanking on at the moment. But yeah, if you order all of those via an online independent bookseller or go to your independent bookseller here to support them for the holiday season, you will get a workout holding those bags on your way home, because there's a lot of information in all of these. So I'm going to throw this back up under there. I hope that still works. Cool. Hey, thanks, Sharon. I always appreciate your questions. From Pam, another one. Where can we find the recipes for the roulades that you showed us at the top of the program? I see a recipe for the smoked turkey, but not for those two. They look great. Well, thank you. I know that we did the recipes for those. I'm not sure exactly where we put them. Maybe to my colleague Patrick, if you could hey, Patrick's talking in my ear right now. He said that we don't actually have them printed right now, but we will. And Sharon, I'll make sure, was that Sharon? No, Pam. Pam, we'll make sure to get those emailed out to you as well. But for all of you, look for those. I think they might be in a subsequent email about this event. So thanks for that. I appreciate you thinking those look good and for accepting the challenge to throw down on that. Cool. All right, next question from Kate. Hi, Kate. I believe that you're new to this. I appreciate you joining us. So, have you ever tried sous vide to get the turkey started and keep it moist and then roast it in the oven? Since my own oven is sous vide capable, I thought I'd ask. Sous vide capable oven. I don't even know about these things. But I do know about sous vide. So yes, absolutely. Sous videing is, for any of you who don't know, is cooking under vacuum, which means basically putting whatever you were cooking into a bag and then sealing the bag and then pulling all of the air out of the bag through vacuum, whether it's a professional tool or just literally sucking it out with your mouth on a Ziploc bag. You can pretty much fake it. And then cooking it in a very low heat, very consistent environment. Now they make sous vide baths, and I've got one from Anovo, A-N-O-V-O. And I basically just set up a big pot full of water and I put it in, and I can tell it exactly what temperature to keep it at, and it keeps it within 1.5 degrees of that temperature at very low temps. So I'm talking like 180 degrees or so. So you can cook the bird perfectly, get it all the way done, all the way throughout, so you're absolutely sure that it's cooked. And it's really hard to overcook a turkey or a bird when you're set it to the temperature that's below overcooked, right? It's actually impossible. And then throw it in the oven under your broiler, throw it in a cast iron pan or something to get it crisp and just give it some texture and color. Yeah, sous vide is great. Plus, you can add flavors in there while cooking that really, really infuse very much. I would just say that be careful of adding too much flavor. You don't want to overdo it. Like one sprig of rosemary will end up being like a field of rosemary after a bath and turn in a sous vide. So just be careful with big flavors and not overdoing them. All right. Cheryl, after a wet brine method for turkey, should the turkey be air chilled to dry out the skin? And what's the best temperature to roast the turkey using a convection oven? Great question. Sure, you can air dry it. And I do recommend that, just putting it out in the fridge with the skin exposed for even just an hour or so. Putting it on the countertop with a fan blowing on it is a great way to, and I often do that. In Maine, I can just leave it outside on a table on I live right on the coast, so I always have a beautiful sea breeze blowing in. Life is good. So I can dry my turkey in my lovely salt air. Yes, life is good, as I said. So browning the turkey involves caramelizing it, which involves getting rid of all the moisture in it. So you don't want to put a soaking wet, sopping turkey in your oven, because then you're just going to steam it all off, right? So even patting it dry with a towel before you do that, before you go to dry it further, is a great thing to do. And if you are especially going to smoke a turkey, you really do want to give it a drying period, because smoke adheres to the sticky substance that forms on the outside once you've dry brined or wet brined, and that's called the pellicle. And those are water-soluble proteins that have been drawn out by the salt in the brine. And once those dry, they become very sticky and tacky. And that's what the smoke sticks to, adheres to, and so you get so much more flavor and depth of flavor and adherence there. So, great question. Thanks. All right, from Susan, can you give tips on prepping a turkey for smoking in a smoker outdoors? Sure. So we kind of dived into that. So dry brine or wet brine, giving it time to dry off. Pick your brine. You know what? Any brine is going to work. Just salt is fine. Salt and sugar is fine. Any flavor combination, as I had mentioned earlier, that works for you generally is going to be great. I would avoid any marinades on there because you're really smoking the turkey. That's your flavor process. Spatchcocking is a great thing to do. It just makes it, again, it gives you more sort of control over the cooking process. You might even need to cut it in half then, split the breast so that you have two pieces so that you can put it on two different levels. But that way also then you get the backbone out of there. The backbone isn't smoked. So you can still make a stock out of it that's not going to be overly smoky. It's hard to make something overly smoky for me. But that's just one interesting way to think about it. Drying out that breast, drying out that skin as we spoke of. But also the skin, I like to smoke to flavor. So I'll smoke for maybe even 20 minutes, half an hour, maybe an hour on a low, slow smoke. And then I'll throw it in the oven and finish it the way that I am cooking the one that we have here. And the reason for that is I feel like I've got a lot more control over it here. Plus in Maine, come Thanksgiving, it's can't really stay outside that long. Yeah. So although I do, but just having things anyway. That's up to you. That's up to the organization, your kitchen, and how things flow for you. But All right. Good to see you. All right. Via, will you add your book name and the NYT Hesser book, please, here? Sure. So that the NYT book was, I believe it's The Recipes of Record. I believe that's it. I just saw it today. I think it's brand new out. Her name is Amanda Hesser. You've got her last name spelled correctly there. And then my book is my name. I'm the author, and The Joy of Seafood. So thanks. I appreciate the support. And Patrick just threw up a link there for all of my books because I have 8 of them. They make really great holiday presents, by the way. And you know what? If any of you want to contact me and have a signed copy, I'd be more than happy to do that, and we can do the sale between us. Anyway, Barton@ruby.com. My email is over there, I think somewhere, but Barton@ruby.com. Hey, I appreciate you asking after that. Thanks, Via. From Richard, can you give or provide some techniques for brining and smoking a turkey? So just talked about that there a little bit. The brines we went over, just any flavor combination, mess around with them. If you're going to be doing this for a first time for your Thanksgiving dinner, mess around with a chicken for, a week or two ahead of time. Just try and get it right. It's not going to be a perfect analog recipe, but you're going to get a sense of the process. You're going to get a sense of how the brine flavors the bird and to what degree you want those flavors sort of injected into it. So there you go. That's the way I do it. And in terms of the smoker, 2 different methods. One is to basically cold smoke, basically smoke to flavor, and then cook it in your oven. And by the way, your house will smell amazing. I mean, smoked turkey fat hitting a hot pan and jumping off, and just all those sexy, sultry, smoky, rustic wood cabin in the woods, autumn glory wine, sweet potato, mushroom, gravy, family, children, love, everything good in the world. That's what it smells like. Yeah. So you can do that inside your house, or if you've got the smoker to accomplish it, set it for a low, slow temperature and just let it go for several hours outside. But really, that's following your manufacturer's instructions. And honestly, there is such a cabal and sort of cult of smoking out there. Excuse me, and people who know it so well and who are really truly experts on it that sort of follow those threads. Go look up your smoker, make the brand, and they will probably they will have great information on that, better than I can give, because smokers are very different per brand. So thanks for your question. Appreciate that. And you know what? Because I have it right in front of me, another recommendation that I want to make, and something that has given me a lot of joy recently, before I get to Hilda. Hi, friend. Before I get to your question, I want to recommend a wine for you. And I'll recommend wines each event here, but something that I have been having a huge amount of fun with is this Enfield Wine Company. They are out of California. And what's really fun about this is John Lockwood, who is the winemaker on this and the vision on this. He has a vision that California wines should really be very terroir driven, very much of place, very much a product of all things of where they are grown. He is an excellent, incredibly talented winemaker. He also happens to be one of my very best friends from like first grade, through all of elementary school, and we went to high school together as well. And I recently reconnected with him and found these products, EnfieldWines.com. I think we have a list up there. But they make a Citrine Chardonnay, which is the very best, just easy drinking Chardonnay that I think I've ever had. It is very subtle and wonderful, super high in acidity, but just as charming and bracing and beautiful as that grape and that wine can get, I believe, in the sort of easy drinking level. Is this a Grand Cru Burgundy? No, but at $20 or whatever it is, $25, like you throw it back and it's delicious. Perfect Thanksgiving wine. This is the 2019 vintage, which I believe is the only one that's available now. 2020 might be coming soon. EnfieldWine.com. You can get it shipped direct to you. Please support my friend, because he's worth supporting, because he's a great dude and also just a visionary winemaker, really making some very compelling wines. And all of their reds are knock me off my socks. Knock me out of my socks. Good. So Enfield Wines. I've got no financial ties to them other than I really like drinking it. I really like supporting people that I really like and who I admire. And EnfieldWine.com. Check it out. There you go. Let's get to a question. Hey, Hilda. Hey, Hilda. Excuse me. Thanksgiving in Canada. You've already celebrated. I know. You Canadians you're always ahead of us. You're just one step ahead. What's your feeling about roasting a turkey at very high heat all the way from beginning to end unstuffed? So I generally don't do that unless I've spatchcocked it, at which point I feel I have enough control over it. So very high temperatures. If you've brought the turkey up to like room temp, and I mean real room temp, like 70, 75 degrees, high temp can work. But if you've got those dense bones, and I don't mean just bringing the flesh up to room temperature, I mean the whole thing, if you're comfortable with that, and the bones themselves are room temperature, then high heat will work and yield you a good product. But if you've got 35-degree dense tissue bones, and you're trying to get 450 degrees of heat into that, you're just battling. And what ends up losing in the battle, the cannon fodder of this battle, is the quality of the breast meat. So I don't do that for that reason, but a spatchcock, yes, it would work. And unstuffed, yes. I never cook the stuffing in a bird. I mean, I've done it before because people asked me to, but like I now have to cook. So here's your bird, right? And you've got breast meat here, and you've got stuffing here, and you've got a dense backbone here, right? And you got stuffing in the middle. So you've now given yourself a food safety hazard that I have to get the very middle of this stuffing to be 165 degrees. What does that mean for this breast meat? Well, that means this stuff is maybe 165, but this stuff is about 200. And this dense backbone, you're not cooking through that. So Yes, you get some flavor out of it because the drippings from the bird fall into the bread and the stuffing and absorb. Okay, fine. Just make some turkey stock ahead of time. You got all those giblets. Spatchcock the bird and get the backbone. Make a stock ahead of time and make your stuffing with that, with some of the fat from the bird too that's been water rendered out into that stock. And you've got the exact same thing. And you've got better quality meat. So unstuffed all the way. Nancy D, how about a nice citrus dry brine? Woohoo! Yes, I love that. So the only issue with that is to get the citrus flavor in there, you'd use the citrus zest because it's dry. You're not using the juice. Although you could use the juice, but you're sort of cevicheing it at this point, and the juice isn't so much that you would end up wet brining it. So just salt and citrus juice would be fine. But if you're using the zest, the problem with the zest is that it then gets stuck on the outside. And depending on your cook method, it will likely burn. And it won't look really great because you'll have all these kind of little threads on it. I'm fine with that. Seriously, I'm fine with it. Put a parsley fennel butter on top of it when you roast it, and you wouldn't even notice it. But you'd have all that fennel inside. So citrus is really great flavor to add to that and to combine to it. But there you go. From Daryl, empty nesters who just want to prepare a turkey breast. Do you have any suggestions? You know what, Daryl? That is a great prompt to go check out this new method that I have not tried before, which is the salt roasted. And let's give it a try. So this is a salt roasted Cornish game hen, which I think is just as much fun as turkey because, well, when do you eat Cornish game hens, right? So I'm just going to crack the salt crust. So this is egg whites. This is about 2 pounds of salt, 1.5 pounds of kosher salt, 3 egg whites, and I added in there a couple tablespoons of herb sant. Almost got both of them. I got the one that mattered though. The bottle that would have cracked. A couple tablespoons of herb sant or Pernod. It's a fennel scented liqueur, anise scented liqueur. I love me some fennel. It's just what it is. So some of that in there, and that will perfume the bird. Underneath it, where did that come from? Underneath it, I've got some fennel stalks that I just have sitting around because I use and grow so much fennel. So here's that bird. And do I worry about getting too salty? No, because I can just take off all of that salt. All of that salt and the fennel stalks underneath are trash. So just kind of pat it dry. So let's get a carving knife. Let's see how I did. So this is a Cornish game hen. This was in there for about 20 minutes. You see how that it literally just jumped water. It just popped out of it. All right. So that was about 25 minutes or so. And I would venture to say that that is utterly perfect. Watch this. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I'll admit that. All right. So how does it taste? Yeah. Okay. So that's what you should do because that's really delicious. So enough salt as you need to cover it. If you're doing a turkey breast, I'd probably say you're talking about 2 boxes of kosher salt, 6 pounds or so. And again, don't worry. Yes, this bird is going to be salt positive. It's not going to be salty because that crust cooks off of the bird. And what it does is it seals in the moisture. It provides basically like a sous vide environment where all that moisture has nowhere to go but back into the bird. So you're in effect steaming the bird in bird juice. Sounds gross, but it also sounds delicious. This is really, really good. So this bird was frozen and has some moisture loss because of that. I would recommend a fresh bird to do this. But yeah, there you go. So for every 2 to 3 pounds of salt, kosher salt, I would recommend 3 egg whites and maybe a tablespoon or 2 of anise-scented liqueur or bourbon or rum or whatever you want. Anything that sounds fun, anything that you're drinking, throw in a little bit of white wine, red wine, whatever, or none at all. But that would be a really fun way to do that. But also, if you wanted to just do something more traditional, set a bed of mushrooms, Brussels sprouts, maybe some chopped parsnips. Things that are sweet and woodsy, I like, is a really nice base. Otherwise, do your potatoes separately, do your sweet potatoes separately, whatever else you do. But Brussels sprouts really benefit from all those drippings and the juices. Parsnips do as well. Mushrooms just soak it all up, but also add their own moisture to it. Low and slow, put a very hot pan, cast iron pan, something like that, a Le Creuset, a Staub, a Lodge pan. Get it rip-roaring hot, a whole bunch of fat in there. Throw in your vegetables. Let them get a little bit brown. Throw your breast right on top of it. A little bit of butter. Cover it with some foil and roast it 325 or so until it's just about done. Pull it out, take off the foil, finish it under the broiler to get a little bit crisp. But again, what you're looking for is heat from below, heat from above. That is managed. Hey, Daryl. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. And that was really good. All right. From Debbie, what are your thoughts on covering the breast with a butter and wine-soaked cheesecloth? Huh. I've never heard of that. What are my thoughts? What do I think of that? I'm thinking. I'm not sure I need the cheesecloth. If you just keep basting it. Now, I've been talking to you this whole time instead of paying attention to the bird that's in my oven right now. But if you are paying attention to it, and I get it if you're roasting a very big giant bird over plenty of time, but that cheesecloth is going to it's gonna drip off just as much as the other. I mean, you might get a little bit more coverage, but really just all you're doing is adding some basting, but you're also adding cheesecloth, which in my opinion is probably just going to get stuck to things as well. So let's check this one. So this is that herb butter that I've put on top. And you can see that butter and all those juices are now forming in the bottom of the pan. Those Brussels sprouts are perfectly cooked and they're a little bit crunchy on some sides and on others. I've got a little bit more of that butter that I'm going to add on to kind of freshen that up and get it a little bit more evenly dispersed. Throw this in there for another 3 to 4 minutes, 5 minutes. I'm also going to take a temperature reading. And when I take a temperature reading, I go in right between the leg and the breast, right down there, right along the bone. And what I've got is about 135. So that's another 12 minutes or so, 15 minutes max, because again, that's going to carry through. So yeah, I'm not sure about the cheesecloth. I'm not sure it's necessary. You're sort of adding an extra step. You can see that the herbs stayed on there well. If I was working and pulling it out every 10 minutes or so to baste it, doesn't that seem like a lot of work and maybe dangerous pulling a giant big turkey in and out of the oven? Yeah. So I guess there's pros and cons to that. So appreciate your question. Thanks. It's fun to think about that. What's the difference between wet and dry brines from Karen? So a dry brine is just salting it early. Just dry salt. Put it on and just let it sit for a while. Hi, am I back? Hi, everybody. I'm back. My camera apparently ran out of batteries, even though I thought it never would. So I'm glad we only have 2 more questions. I'm sorry that I lost you there for a minute. But the question was the difference between wet brine and dry brine, if I remember correctly. So wet brine is when you create a solution where the salt and the sugar or whatever else you're using and flavorings are dissolved into water. And the benefit there is that you can add a whole lot of flavors. I mean, you can steep it with coffee, you can add red wine, citrus juice, soy sauce, whatever you want, a whole lot of flavors. If you're doing a dry brine and just adding it to the top, you're not going to get a huge amount of flavor penetration, like citrus zest, some garlic paste, fennel seeds. Yes, there'll be some, but mostly it's still going to sit on the top. If that flavor is infused into the liquid, it gets a little bit more integrated. The difference in timing is not so much, depending on the saturation. Like if you have a super, super salty brine, you don't want to do it very long because you end up cooking and drying out the bird and just kind of killing it again in salt. But generally about a half cup of salt, 1/3 cup of sugar to 1 quart of water, maybe double that would be fine. But you get to take your time with it. So the other thing is that dry brining is a lot easier because you're not creating a whole recipe for a brine and then having to store a turkey dipped in brine, which for a big turkey is several gallons of water. That is now a very heavy pan, right? That you're tracking all over the house and it's sloshing and you got to find room for it in the fridge and it's a lot. Here in Maine, I can just put it outside and it's fine, no problem, except for the raccoons. But anyway, thanks for your question, Karen. I appreciate you. And last question, Trish, what do I think of the deep frying technique, turkey? Any technique suggestions? You know what? I have actually never deep fried a turkey. But I know that it works well. But again, you're sort of dealing with what are your expectations of it? And to me, the expectation is that the meat is moist and delicious. So cook it lower and slower to me. You're not trying to crisp the skin, at least at first. I think to crisp a skin, you have to sacrifice the quality of the meat, at least directly underneath it. So cook it low and slow. Let it cook in the very dense heat of that oil, in the complete coverage of the heat of that oil. You know, it gets all the way down into the cavity. And so it's literally touching the flesh so that it cooks a lot more evenly and quickly. And if you really want to get it crisp, take the turkey out, dry it off, let the oil get very, very hot, and then dunk it in and let it crisp. So you're really just cooking the skin at that point, not trying to get any of the meat inside cooked. And the other key is safety on that. I mean, like Thanksgiving, like on Super Bowl Sunday, the #1 injury in emergency rooms in America is people stabbing their hands when trying to make guacamole and cutting avocados. 4th of July, the #1 injury is firework burns. Thanksgiving, the #1 injury is deep fried turkey burns. So don't be a statistic. Just do it really carefully. Make sure it's very, very dry when you put the turkey in. Don't drop it in. Make sure that that the cavity fills up slowly so that you don't drop it in and that cavity it all sucks in and then pops out, which it has the potential to do. And look up turkey frying safety tips that I don't know as well as experts will about the right temperatures to add it in and not, because you don't want it bubbling over, etc. So make sure it's dry. Water and oil are not friends when heat is involved. So, hey, I wish all of you the very, very best. I really hope that you join us again for our next event and all of these events here at Ruby with my wonderful and delicious colleagues. Thank you all so much. Bon appetit. Happy Thanksgiving and this holiday when we celebrate all that we are grateful for. Oh, I am grateful for you. I am grateful for this chicken, which my children and wife will eat for dinner tonight as I'm off an event. Cheers, friends. Take good care. We'll see you again soon.